An official good evening to everyone gathered, and thank you for coming out on this can't decide what it wants to be weather kind of a Saturday here in Greater Philadelphia. But we are very thankful to have you present so that we can talk about life. We can talk about growing up and learning and having our hearts broken and put back together, and what it means to come of age in the age that Kevin and I have come of age in this country, where being of color is both a blessing and a liability. And that is the substance of much of what is described in the 13 essays that are included in this brand new book that we will be kind of discussing in and around, because it's really more about making peace with the journey, which I know a lot of us have some difficulty with and cannot necessarily do without, as Bill Shirt says, therapy saves lives.
Yes.
That's real talk.
Yes.
And knowing what the challenges are, facing them, and then having the courage to share them in a collection is part of what we are celebrating tonight.
Thank
as
you.
we welcome Kevin Powell here to Uncle Bobbies.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so I've known Kevin so long, I can't remember how I met him. So, you know, I would like to not have this feel formal, and that's not how we interact with one another. We talk.
Yes.
And this book is frank conversation, formatted many of the pieces as open letters to people who have been impactful in your life in one way or another. And so 13th book,
Yeah.
13 essays.
It's crazy.
And
13.
you know, we have a whole lot of conversation about 13 as it relates to national symbolism. But how did you settle on the way that this would be presented?
It wasn't planned. My 13th book is supposed to be, or was supposed to be, a biography of Tupac Shakur, which I've been working on for years and years and years. It's happening. It's definitely happening. But a year ago, I started thinking about, I said, I need to say something about these times that we're in. And I realized I've been writing a series of blogs, what we call, essays, what we call blogs now, all over the place. And I saw the responses to some of them. I said, Simon Schuster, would you mind if I slip a little book in there before the Tupac book? They weren't particularly happy about it because they want the Tupac book, But once they read the manuscript, and I want to shout out my brother Michael Cohen and his beautiful wife, who are in the audience, fellow New Yorkers. Michael's been with me, helping me to edit books for the last couple of years, and I really appreciate him. Just thank you, brother Michael, so much. And what Michael and I share is a love of history, and we talk a lot about what happened in the 60s, and obviously you think about James Baldwin, you think about Bobby Kennedy, Dr. King. And so I wanted to put something out there that talked about race and gender and class and pop culture and just what's happening. And also, my mom has been sick for the past 2 years or so. God bless her, and it's something me and Brother Mike were talking about, just how sacred mothers are. I just want to shout out all the mothers out there, how valuable you all are. And I was raised by a single mother. And so I actually dreamed the title, My Mother, Barack Obama, because it's the 10th anniversary of Barack becoming president of the United States, the first black president for the United States, Donald Trump. And then I just thought about this whole thing about him being an angry white man, and not just him, but a lot of white males out there who have been severely hostile, to people of color, to women, to immigrant people, to the queer community across the board. And it was a way to really try to talk about what's happening around race in this country by adding them. But also, I noticed that historically, certain types of heterosexual straight white men are quick to label other people as angry. But I'm like, well, what if we said that you were actually the angry one,
right,
given the policies that have been put out there? I mean, I was just reading as my wife and I, she's in the back, as we were driving down, Jenna Parkham's my wife, we're driving down, and all the women, diverse women who were in at the confirmation hearing for Brett Kavanaugh to be Supreme Court Justice, and just, all of them challenging this, because we know Roe v. Wade is going to be under attack if this man gets in, and other policies are going to be under attack, other laws are going to be under attack. And so I wanted to bring something together, and I'm really glad that I did it. It is not easy writing essays. The original, the one piece that's original, the title essay is the last essay in the book. I literally wrote that this year. And that was hard because the first part of it is very much about my mother and her illness. And over the last 2 years, me and she and I going on these weekly grocery trips, stores to the groceries, and it forced me to have some reassessment about race and gender and class, because that literally, this illness has also exploded in the middle of the Me Too movement.
Yes.
And so I said, let me put my mother in the context of the Me Too movement, because she certainly has dealt with sexism her entire life. And one of the things I say in that essay is how she shared with me when I was a boy, her being sexually harassed by an employer, not that different than Harvey Weinstein or Bill Cosby, the boss of, she was the help basically in the home of a wealthy white male in Westchester County, and he literally, when no one else was home, came out in a robe and opened his robe, and there was his private parts. I don't know to this day how my mother got out of that space without getting raped, to be honest with you all, but somehow she did, and for whatever reason she just shared it with me, and it just stuck with me, but it wasn't until I became an adult male that I started really thinking about patriarchy, about sexism, about misogyny. And so, for me, this book is really about love and hope, but also us understanding the intersections of all these things that happen in this country.
I want to keep it upbeat for a minute, although I know we got to talk about some real things. The idea of that you express in some of these essays is also an admiration for young Black men figuring things out and understanding the challenge that they face in dealing with their personal lives in very public spaces.
Yeah.
When we talk about a Cam Newton,
Yes.
or when we talk about a Tupac, or even the opening essay to the young man who reached out to you, trying to find his way, and you talk about the journey, the pressure of growing up and learning yourself and forgiving yourself and growing in a public space, because you very much did that on the first reality TV show that we really acknowledge. Yeah.
That was me? Yes, ma'am. I mean, yeah, I was on the first season of MTV's The Real World, and I literally started writing.
Oh yeah.
And also, and also, a man named Quincy Jones gave me an opportunity to write for Vibe magazine. This is all in my 20s. It all happened very fast. I was literally in obscurity. I mean, like most writers, most artists in New York City, you're struggling, and it's not easy, to be a creative person in a city like Philly or New York, big cities like this. But it happened fast, and nothing really prepares you for it, and as I say in this book, in my memoir, The Education of Kevin Powell, before this, I didn't have there was no blueprint. There was nothing. I love the gentleman's shirt, Therapy Saves Lives. I'm a big advocate of therapy. I actually am eager to go back this fall. I cannot wait. Been going since I was in my early 20s. I remember when I saw the great movie with Denzel Washington, Antoine Fisher. I mean, I was in the back of the theater. I remember myself, I had my hoodie on, my Timberlands on. I was just like, I'm not gonna cry, I'm not gonna cry, I'm not gonna cry. And there was a gentleman, a Black brother across from me, and at the end of the movie, we both were crying.
Oh,
you know what I'm saying? Because you realize a lot of us, is not just Black males, but all males, oftentimes, because the way manhood is defined in this society, this world that we live in, James Baldwin said it best, it's like a male prison. Men don't cry, men don't express emotions.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And if you're a heterosexual male the way I am, a so-called straight male, it's like, I remember suppressing when I was a child that I loved writing and reading because that was considered corny. You'll always say something homophobic to describe boys who actually like art and literature, which is dangerous.
Yes.
I love sports. Y'all can tell I love sports. I've referenced it about 3 or 4 times already, you know what I mean? But I also love art and culture and self-expression. And I think that we've equated manhood with violence, with competition, with senseless ego. The piece that I've worked on, there's a piece in there about Cam Newton, the football player. I worked on it for about 6 months. I literally followed Cam, Baltimore, when he played a preseason game against the Ravens, training camp in Charlotte, South Carolina, and also in California. And one of the things that became clear to me that I say in the piece is that the people around Cam are not really interested in Cam actually developing as a human being,
Right.
which is one reason why I love Michael Bennett of the Philadelphia Eagles, why I love Malcolm Jenkins of the Philadelphia Eagles, because you see black male athletes who are not just about football, but they're also about, I want to be a whole human being. If I want to protest racial profiling and police brutality, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
You know, which is why I love when Malcolm Jenkins made the media here read the signs. You know, y'all know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because he's like, y'all keep ignoring who I am as a whole human being. But most of us, unfortunately, no matter who we are as men, don't really have conversations about masculinity, you know, or it becomes toxic manhood. You know, my wife has a show called She, a choreo play that's going to debut off Broadway next summer. And it's about ending violence against women and girls. It's about healing and empowerment. And a lot of men have actually said to me, I can't support it because it ain't got nothing to do with me. Well, if most of the violence that happens against women is at the hands of men, it has everything to do with you.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? Which is a fact. 1 out of 4 women and girls in this country, 1 out of 3 on the planet will be the victims of sexual violence at the hands of men or boys, which says to us this is a global problem, how we define manhood. This is not women's problem.
Right.
This is our problem. Do y'all feel what I'm saying? Yeah. And so that's why even the Jay-Z essay, I have an essay on Jay-Z in there because I wanted to write something about the 444 album, you know, because people kept saying, you know, people were saying all kinds of stuff because, you know, people got caught up in, well, is that what really happened on the video with Solange and Beyonce and Jay-Z? I'm like, maybe, probably, you know what I'm saying? Now that he put it all out there,
Right.
you know what I mean? And Beyonce did Lemonade. But the deeper thing is I see a man in his 40s who's at the apex. I mean, Jay-Z's been around now for over 20 years. Yep. You know what I mean? This is a major icon, not just in hip hop, but globally. He's grappling with definitions of manhood. Yep. Because he realizes if he does not, he's going to lose his wife and his children, which is more important to him than his career. Y'all feel what I'm saying? Yeah. And it takes a really profound kind of shift for a man to do that. So that's what I think about a lot in this book, you know.
Mm-hmm. And the weight of that scrutiny, though, for people who have yet to do the work is challenging.
Yeah.
Because it takes a lot. I mean, you know, there are people who, of course, who will argue that Jay-Z, Solange, and Beyonce have all benefited from taking this very public disagreement and each constructing albums that really begin to, and now, you know, we got a new one and Jay-Z and Beyonce are on tour together. So there is some commercial gain to the work that they are doing, but that they have codified into more material that they are using. And so, but that's what they do. So I don't think that's necessarily anything wrong with that. But there is it brings us to kind of weaving in some more current events. Of course, we have Nike's 30th anniversary campaign, right? And now the reignited conversation around Kaepernick and the protest and what it was all about, and these stupid folks who are cutting swooshes off of their stuff and burning stuff and burning their houses down. But the part of the dialogue that we are having as a community around that is whether people feel Kaepernick can remain authentic when his biggest check is being signed by that kind of global corporation. And so I wonder, you know, like this is something you've lived through, the idea of how you tell your truth, how you stand in your truth, but you also got to eat.
Wow. Let me say this because I believe in being brutally honest. 2018 has been one of the worst years of my life. I've had 3 years that I consider horrific. 1988, when I was kicked out of college and my grandmother died. You know, I only know my mother's side, so I only knew my grandmother, my mother's mother. 1996, when I was fired from Vibe magazine after all the cover stories, all the successes. And it was also the year that Tupac Shakur died. I was in Vegas when he died, and I have not been back to Vegas since then because of the trauma of that whole experience. And then this year, it's been profound for me as a married man now of 1 year with my wife, and you know, some of the things that we've experienced, you know, financially, betrayals from certain kinds of people, et cetera. And, you know, let me say it like this. I am a student of history, and I'm an activist 30 plus years. So that means that I challenge any forms of injustice. And that certainly means economic exploitation of people.
Yes.
You know, that means being a critical thinker around what we call capitalism. You know, it means I challenge people who are greedy, who step on other people just to get material gain. You know, but I also am clear that as an activist, as an artist, you know, that I've experienced great highs financially, and I've experienced times where I have had absolutely no money whatsoever. And I know for a fact, because of the conditioning of a lot of us in this country, and not just black people, but all people, a lot of people don't really support activists nor artists in this country.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I've had to grapple with the fact that I've got to make some choices here, especially now that I'm in a partnership for life, and there will eventually be a family there that we've got to be able to eat and not just survive, but how do we actually win?
Yes, sir.
You know, and so I think that, you know, when it comes to Jay-Z and Solange and Beyonce, I actually enjoyed all of the albums. Let me just say that for the record. You know, and I agree that they're super wealthy, but I also think, and this is just me speaking, I think that just because people are super wealthy doesn't mean that they can't also go through a process of trying to figure out their stuff in a public space. You know what I mean? You know, it's almost like, it's like when I hear people, and because I've been a part of celebrity culture, it's like, I remember when Tupac was alive, people had all this criticism of Tupac. I'm like, yeah, he's a superstar, he's mad famous, but it doesn't mean that you don't have issues, you know what I mean? And one thing I'm clear about, as someone who's interviewed a whole range of famous people through the years, one of the things that fame does to a lot of people is that after you become famous, you actually don't grow anymore, unless you actually do some serious self-reflection, or you have people around you who are yes people. Y'all feel what I'm saying?
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so you end up getting stuck. And there's one reason why I love that show with Jada Pinkett and her daughter and her mother is because they're having some very serious conversations that you don't often see famous people have. And so I'm a little sensitive to the thing about famous people and people dissing famous people. I'm not saying you did it, but I hear people doing it on social media all the time. I ask, do you actually know these people?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You know, do you think that they don't go through the stuff that other people go through just because they're famous? And, you know, my thing is like, you know, when I heard Jay-Z acknowledging that his mother is a lesbian, that's a profound moment. You know what I mean? Because pretty much all of us have someone in our family who is queer.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And, you know, for someone who comes from this culture that is hyper masculine, hip hop, to say, you know what, I used to be ashamed of you as my mother, but now I want your voice, your name to be on this record. That's a profound moment. You know, for him to admit infidelity, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter to me if he's famous or not. I'm like, this is a man who's admitting that he's made mistakes, and he doesn't have to do it because male privilege protects you from doing that stuff.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so I try to find, you know, when you asked the question, I thought about John Lennon, who's my favorite Beatle. I love the Beatles, y'all. I don't just listen to hip hop. I love the Beatles, right? I love all kinds of music, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
But John Lennon said something years back. He said, man, I don't make art just for people. I want people to actually buy my art, you know what I'm saying? And I want people to buy the books, you know? It's like, I don't, you know, and there was a time, one reason why I keep saying now my 13th book, because there was a time where I went from MTV and Vibe to being so anti-celebrity, and Brother Cohen knows, he's known me through most of this, you know what I'm saying? I didn't want to do media, I would only do your show, because I'm like, I like her, you know what I'm saying? And I realized I was actually doing a disservice to myself as someone who's in a public space by not even talking about it. Like people didn't even know how many books I had. They're like, oh, you did more than 2 books? I was like, yeah, man. But I went to the other extreme, and I think balance, something that they teach us, you know, I'm a yogi, I'm a vegan now, something they teach us is like this importance of balance. Like, I create art because I want to empower people, you know what I mean? But I also know that I need to make a living, you know what I mean? You know, and I kind of come from the school of thought of one of my favorite artists, activists, which is Danny Glover. You know, years ago I interviewed Danny, and I said, man, why, you know, tell me how you are able to be so socially conscious, so woke, as we say now, so political, and you take these serious stands. He said, because I go do movies like the Lethal Weapon series and the Royal Tenenbaums that are commercial successes, and I take that money and I put it back in the community. Right. I was like, aha. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I do. I go out and do my speeches at colleges and corporations, just like my brother Mark Lamont Hill does. And you see what he did. He turned it into Uncle Bobbies. I turned it into my community work. Does that make sense, y'all? How am I gonna help anybody if I have nothing? You know what I mean? And so that's where I come from. And then when you think about Colin Kaepernick, I mean, my gosh, I support the brother 100%. You know, I think it's incredible. I've seen, I had a couple of debates with angry white males on social media this week when I posted the Nike ad. You know, people call him unpatriotic. And let's just put this on the record, y'all. The national anthem was written by Francis Scott Key, who was an unabashed racist and trafficked in slavery.
Yes.
And there was a verse that was removed from the national anthem that encouraged and supported slavery. And we know that there's a community of black folks who live in Trinidad and Tobago who descended from black folks in America during that time in the early 1800s, you know, who are called Americans because they were literally shipped out of America to Trinidad and Tobago. That's the context of the national anthem. I'm saying this because I don't just say I'm an American. I actually make it a point to actually learn American history, to actually read and study and travel. And I've been to all 50 states. And I'm not saying that to brag, but it gives you a different perspective when you get out of Philadelphia, when you get out of DC, when you get out of New York. You just don't fly over the country. You actually drive through the country. And when I go to places in these small towns, I actually interact with the people because I'm like, I want to know what the real America is. Y'all feel me? And so, you know, Colin Kaepernick, who is half black and half white, who was raised by two white parents, is being called the N-word, is being called unpatriotic, is called un-American. I'm like, actually, because he's half black and half white, he actually is a bridge builder in his own bloodlines.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And then on top of that, you know, the National Football League, which is the wealthiest of the four major sports. There's baseball, football, basketball, you know what I'm saying, and hockey, which is the four biggest sports in this country. The National Football League makes more money than all of them.
Yes.
You know, barely.
And up until 2 years ago was nonprofit.
It was a nonprofit. Roger Goodell,
those of you who didn't know that.
Goodell, the commissioner of the National Football League, makes $40 million a year. What football game have you ever seen him play in? Y'all feel my point?
Yes.
You know, and so what I'm saying is the angry white people, particularly, and I love all people, I don't care what your background, but the angry white people in particular who have gone off on Colin Kaepernick and Malcolm Jenkins and all these other brothers who have been raising their voices because they come from the same communities where Eric Garner is being chokehold to death on videotape. They come from the same communities where Sandra Bland is being arrested by the police and she's found hung in a jail cell. Y'all with me out there?
Yep.
You know, and so do you think that these athletes, just because they play football or basketball or baseball, whatever the sport is, that they're stupid? They're not stupid. They're intelligent beings. If they can learn playbooks, that also means that they're paying attention to what's going on in their communities and they're saying enough of this. Hey, black men, I can actually, or black women, I can actually leave Uncle Bobbies right now. I could get killed simply because of the color of my skin.
Yes.
And these football players realize they have a major platform. I'm going to use it, which is very American, which is in the tradition of civil disobedience that Ralph Waldo Emerson talked about in the 1800s, that Dr. King talked about in the 1950s and 1960s. It's a continuation of that. This is as American as Muhammad Ali saying, the Vietnamese never called me the N-word. Why'd I go fight and kill them when y'all don't even treat me respectfully in America? Are y'all with me out there?
Yes.
You know, and so I support Colin Kaepernick, and I think that Nike, the first thought I had, to be honest with y'all, I'm glad Colin Kaepernick is being supported by Nike. They should be supporting him because God knows black athletes have made them a fortune. But by the same token, I wish that Nike would stop exploiting workers in countries of color in places in Asia.
Right.
You know, there needs to be both things happening because we know that they're making shoes very cheaply that they sell over here for $200, $300, $400. And because of the mass culture in our country and the miseducation of many of our young people, we end up killing each other over shoes as people of color here that are being made by people of color very cheaply in another part of the world. So we got to also connect the dots, and this is where the conversation around capitalism comes in. Are y'all with me out there? Yeah. You know what I mean? Because we need to tell the whole truth, not just part of the truth. Support Colin Kaepernick, yay Nike, but also Nike, why don't you pay those workers a lot more money? And at the same token, why not hire some people here who actually need some jobs?
Right.
You know, and have them make some of these sneakers in America.
Right.
Instead of shipping everything overseas. I don't know about y'all, but it's interesting to me when I call Sprint or Verizon, and I'm like, people have names like Ellen and Sam, but I'm like, you clearly are not in New York or Philadelphia.
Not at all.
You know what I mean? So it says to me that, you know, there's also such greed in this country that there are people in power who don't even want to pay Americans to work, and so they'd rather pay someone else. And then we wonder why they lie and manipulate these unemployment statistics like they always do.
Yeah.
But I see people struggling out here. So I think that Colin Kaepernick is a blessing. I think that he has created something that will be talked about for years to come. It'll be in the pantheon of, like, you know, John Carlos and Tommy Smith at the '68 Olympics, Muhammad Ali, Paul Robeson, all these folks who came along, Jackie Robinson, Wilma Rudolph, Serena Williams,
Yes.
Serena Williams,
Yes.
you know what I'm saying, who, if y'all really listening to Serena, she's saying very powerful stuff, you know what I mean? And I think that athletes and athletics and sports and music, represent two spaces where we can actually challenge things if we have the courage to do so. I mean, honestly, you know, I don't necessarily like all the music of Meek Mill, but I love the fact that Meek Mill and Brother Rubin, the co-owner of the Sixers, got people thinking about the prison industrial complex in a different way.
Right.
And so I don't knock famous people. Now, do I want Kim Kardashian talking about the prison industrial complex? Not per se, you know what I'm saying? But I do realize, wait a minute. What'd you say? People are listening.
Right, and she's been successful.
They listening. Because we live in a celebrity-obsessed culture, which is more celebrity-obsessed than ever because of social media.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
So as a part B to that, I
Yes.
want to read to you something that a friend of mine posted on Instagram and talk about consequences and repercussions.
Can we also give Stephanie Renee a round of applause? I just need to. I need to say this. When I was real anti doing media, this is one of the few shows anywhere in the country I would do her show on WURD. And so please support this sister. She's a dynamic journalist, and I hope y'all realize the treasure that you have here in Philadelphia.
Oh, thank you, sir. The post says, it was never about the anthem. It was never about the flag. It was never about the military. It was about Patrick Harmon, 50. It was about Philando Castile,
Yes.
32.
Yes.
It was about Alton Sterling,
Yes.
37.
Yes.
It was about Sandra Bland, 28.
That's right.
It was about Anthony Hill, 27.
That's right.
It was about Samuel DuBose, 43. It was about Brendan Glenn, 29. It was about Freddie Gray, 25. It was about Natasha McKenna, 37. It was about Walter Scott, 50.
Yes.
It was about Christian Taylor, 19. It was about Michael Brown, 18.
Wow.
It was about Eric Garner, 43. It was about Akai Gurley, 28.
I worked on that case, my God.
It was about
Brooklyn, New
Laquan
York.
McDonald, 17. It was about Tamir Rice, 12.
Yeah.
It was about Yvette Smith, 47.
Wow.
It was about Ayanna Monet Stanley Jones, 7.
7.
It was about Rakia
7.
Boyd, 22.
22.
It was about Sharice Francis, 29. It was about Sean Bell, 23. It was about Amadou Diallo, 22.
Yeah.
It was about due process of the law. It was about justice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, just yesterday.
Let me tell you something. So when Akai Gurley, it's not one of the more famous cases, but it happened in Brooklyn a couple years ago. I got a call from people asking if I could work on that. 2 police officers just heard something in the stairwell of a housing project in East New York, Brooklyn, just shot into the dark. Akai was with his girlfriend and just murdered Akai.
And the lights weren't working properly in the stairwell.
Exactly. And, you know, the United States Constitution, and it's never been changed, it's never been edited, said that black folks were 3/5 of a human being. And this was for the purposes of what became known as the Electoral College, because we know American history. And so that southern states could have, you know, a certain kind of representation, since black people who were enslaved actually outnumbered white folks in a lot of southern states, like South Carolina, where the majority of my family's from, where my entire family's from, the family tree. When you look at the history of America, I mean, I wouldn't sit here, as I say in the book, and say there has not been progress. My mama got an 8th grade education. My grandmother could not read and write. I have 13 books out. I'm very clear that the civil rights movement and other things that happened allowed me to be in this place where I'm at right now. But because I can't just think about myself, I have to think about an entire country and an entire community of people, my people specifically for a second, 40 million of us. It is tragic to me when my wife and I, you know, drove my mother and my aunt to South Carolina just this summer. The conversation that we had to have is, what do we do if we're stopped by the police or by some white racist? You know what I'm saying? And, you know, it's domestic terrorism. We need to call it what it is. It's domestic terrorism when you have to think a certain kind of way if you have a child, boy or girl, or whatever their gender identity, if you are stopped by the police, this is what you have to do.
Yep.
No other community has to experience that,
No.
you know what I mean, to the extent that we do. But I will say this, the same thing is happening when you see the Latinx community being targeted with the immigrant children being separated, which is directly back to slavery.
Yep.
My wife and I were just in Phoenix, Arizona, where I had to do some speeches last week. After I spoke, a Native American brother, Navajo Nation, Arizona, came up to me. And you know what he said to me? He was stopped by the police and they wanted to deport him. I said, well, why did they want to deport you? Because they actually thought he was lying about being Native American. And so the level of ignorance and fear and hatred and violence all wrapped together is why people of color in this country continue to live in a state of deep paranoia. You know what I mean? And as much as I value and love this thing here, I had to stop watching all those videos. My wife and I were on a vacation 2 years ago in Connecticut, right around the 4th of July, and we're chilling. I had done a residency at an elite boys school, and they gave us a house. We were like, we'll take that free rent, you know what I'm saying? We good with that. And it happened to be the same week that Philando Castile got killed with his partner and their daughter in the car. The police just shot him in the car, and he's bleeding in front of the wife and the daughter. And it was the same week that the brother got killed in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And we were Alton Sterling. And a day or two later, Jen and I are driving around Connecticut, not South Carolina, not Georgia, not anywhere in the South, Connecticut. And someone drove by in a pickup truck with a big Confederate flag out in the back of their truck. And that ended our vacation. We said, we got to get out of here. You know what I mean? And my wife did something very profound. She said, I don't even want you to drive right now because these two black men just got killed. You know? And, you know, and so Mary Baraka said it best, y'all. You know, we have to organize. We got to resist. You know, we got to learn our history, but we also got to be involved in our communities on a consistent basis. We got to push back against injustice in all forms. You know, we can't just complain about it. We can't just say, oh, this is never going to change. No, you have to do something. And I'll say this especially to the black males here. You know, I work with a lot of people in our communities in New York and around the country. The sisters show up a lot. You know what I mean? I'll give you a perfect example. When Trayvon Martin got killed in 2012, 2013, we had like tens of thousands of people who showed up for a big rally protest. We had a march. We took over Times Square. Then when we said, let's have a meeting so we can follow up and talk about things like boycott Florida, you know, certain businesses in Florida, man, maybe 100 people showed up. Most of them were women. There was a lot of dudes who were talking a lot of stuff on the microphone when it was the rally. But when it came time to do the work, gone. And so I need to say this too, as a black male, we need to show up. We need to show up on a consistent basis. And I don't want to hear, you know, well, I'm busy, I got work, I got kids. Guess what? I'm busy too. But we have to show up. You know what I mean? We have to show up on a consistent basis. And one reason why it's important to me is because my father never showed up. And so I feel a responsibility to show up. You know what I mean? To show that there are black men out there who actually care about marriage and family and community on a consistent basis. Are y'all with me out there? You know what I mean? And I don't know how, as a black male, I can watch, how we as black men can watch all these black people getting killed, women and men. I'm glad you mentioned both genders, you know, gender identities, multiple gender identities, but also, you know, if you happen to be a sexist black man and you just think about the men, or it's just black men, and you still don't do anything, that's a problem. You know what I mean? And then to white people out there, you know, y'all gotta be allies. You gotta be real allies. Brother Cohen, the Cohens are allies. That's why they're here. But we need to multiply people like the Cohens because there's a lot of white folks who don't care or who say this is not racism or y'all are exaggerating. You're making this stuff up. It can't be that bad. You know what I mean? It'd be like me as a man saying to a woman, you're exaggerating. You're not gonna get raped when you walk down the street. You're not gonna get touched. You know, how dare any of us who come from any group that is privileged tell someone who's been the victim of our privilege how we should react? Y'all with me? How dare you, if you come from any kind of privilege, tell people who are the victims of your privilege how you should react? That doesn't make any sense. And so I had a white person the other day, and I can't say what happened to me, but a blog is coming out in a couple of days. A very traumatic racist experience that I had. This white person said to me that what I experienced was not racism, which is asking me to dumb myself down, to have no knowledge of history, my own personal experiences, forget all the books I've read. Forget Lerone Bennett, forget Angela Davis, forget Malcolm, forget, Zora Neale Hurston, forget Sonia Sanchez, Philadelphia, Sonia Sanchez, forget Baraka, forget the Black Arts Movement, forget that you studied the Harlem Renaissance, forget everything about, you've learned a lot about African civilizations and the Middle Passes and slavery, forget the fact that you know about Black America and the West Indies and Black folks in Canada and England, all over this world. Act like you just don't know anything.
Right.
And tell me what I'm feeling.
Yeah. Right.
You feel what I'm saying?
Yes. What tickles me about that and that pause is that was very Obama of you.
No, I'm gonna respectfully disagree.
No, but I'm just saying for those of you who kind of watched press conferences or his White House briefings throughout the 8 years of President Obama's tenure, there are times when you could tell he was in the midst of really about to step into the fullness of his black maleness and call somebody stupid or worse, but he would pause and smile.
Well,
and then kind of gather himself in the midst of that and try and proceed. But the smile is just what tickled me.
Well, I got it from Malcolm X because Malcolm is my hero.
Yes.
Malcolm is my hero. The only reason I say that because there's a section in the last essay in the book. I talk about when I went to right after President Obama got elected the first time, 2008. The Teach for America did a gathering of black males at Morehouse College, the historically black male college, and it was about getting more black men to be teachers. And Wendy Kopp, who created Teach for America, a white sister, well-meaning, came up to me after we finished speaking, and she actually said to me, and I say it in the book, that she did not know that there were other black men like Barack Obama out there who were articulate and dynamic. And I'm gonna say that. I say that to say, one, and I know you didn't mean any harm by it, but I'm a real activist. Barack was actually not really an activist at all, a community organizer. That was said to embellish the resume. I've been an activist and organizer for 34 years, and that's not to knock him, but it's to say, hey, there's actually a breadth of black genius out there.
Yes.
In this room. You know what I mean? And I think what often happens in the case of Wendy Kopp and some folks is that they will elevate one person as if only one person can do it at a time. Right. When there's actually many of us out there who are doing amazing work. Some are known, some are not known. Right. And I think that even we as black folks have got to be careful about that. It's like, it's dangerous because it actually perpetuates, we can put it down. Okay. It actually perpetuates the racism, in my humble opinion. It's like, I look at this year, we've had Spike Lee's Black Klansman, we've had, Ava DuVernay's work, we've had Boots Riley's work, Sorry to Bother You. Yes. We've had Ryan Coogler, who's all of 3132 with the phenomenal film Black Panther. There's a plethora of black filmmakers. Y'all know that in Philadelphia, because some of the greatest filmmakers we've had have come out of the city of Philadelphia. And I just say, let's for me, rather than to say, no, I didn't get that from Barack Obama. I got that from Malcolm X, because if you watch Malcolm's interviews on YouTube, he would pause, and he would smile, because Malcolm had an incredible smile. And the fact that both Barack Obama and I both say, like many black men, that the most important book that we've ever read was the Autobiography of Malcolm X, says that Malcolm is the real definition that many of us aspire to. You know what I mean? And so for me, and I'm saying this also as an activist organizer, Malcolm and Martin paid the ultimate price.
Yes, they did.
And I'm not saying you have to die, but it shed that the level of integrity that they had in their love, even with their contradictions and their shortcomings, but their deep love for the community was profound. And I think since you mentioned Barack Obama, it was historic. I realized how much, we need symbols as black people. I'm real clear about that. Like Serena Williams means something. I remember when Venus Williams, her sister won her first championship, might have been in Wimbledon years back, right? I remember a whole bunch of us were at the laundromat on a Saturday, you know what I'm saying? Black folks just in Brooklyn just gather around TV like, yo, Venus gonna win this, son, you know what I'm saying? Because when Venus wins, we win. When Serena wins, we win. When Barack wins, we win. When Michelle wins, we win. Yes. When Jackie Robinson won, we won. When Ali won, we won. When he says, I'm the greatest, we are the greatest. Y'all feel what I'm saying? Yeah. You know what I mean? And so, and any people that have been oppressed or marginalized, it could be black people, Latinx people, Asian people. When Crazy Rich Asians did so well at the box office, I mean, it shouldn't take 25 years between the Joy Luck Club in 1993 and then Crazy Rich Asians in 2018, which is a whole nother conversation about racism in Hollywood. But we need symbolic victories. You know, just like Italian people and Jewish people and Polish people, no matter what your identity, you need to see yourself.
Yes.
You need to see yourself, because if you don't see yourself, you don't think you're valuable. You know what I mean? And so I get why Barack, outside the crooked preacher that my mama had on her wall at home, you know what I'm saying? That's my mama, God bless her, but I'm like, why is this preacher on the wall when he shook us down for so much money back in the day? But it means something that Barack and Michelle and her two daughters, their two daughters, are on the wall, because, you know, my mama couldn't imagine that. She's born in 1943 in South Carolina. Her birth certificate says colored. Y'all feel what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so that means something, that a Barack Obama could become president of the United States, even if it's a symbolic victory. You know, even if we have to have questions about the political system, which means that he couldn't even do a lot of stuff that he wanted to do, not just for black people, because he was not the black president, he was the president of the United States, but the Republicans had him tied up. And if we're really honest about it, a lot of Democrats don't even have a vision, to be honest about it. You know what I mean? And so I get why we love him. You know what I mean? I get, especially now in the era of Trump, why we're like, dang, man. You know what I'm saying? Can he come back? Can they come back? You know what I mean? And when you talk about codifying things, I'm like, Michelle and Barack, get as much money as you can. Get those speaking checks, get those book deals, you know what I'm saying? Netflix, all of it.
Yeah.
You know, but I just think that, wow, you triggered something. Because I just think that when I think back to Wendy Kopp, the thing I say in the book is that here's a woman who created this, a white sister who created Teach for America. It's mostly in communities of color, poor communities of color, you know, and she's working with black males who are boys in those schools. And how could you not know that black males are intelligent and articulate if you're running a program called Teach for America all around the country in black communities?
Right.
You know what I mean? Do you actually engage with the people that you're supposed to be representing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what is the circle that you run in where you think that Barack, you know, or like I've gotten it too, like, well, Kevin, you're so articulate. Many of us have heard this, or you're so intelligent, or I'm like, well, there's actually a whole range of us.
Yeah.
You know, there's a whole bunch of us.
Yeah.
Come on, Negroes, come join us. Let them see us. I mean, but it's insanity. But it's like, it grows. This is where intersectionality comes in. If you go back to the Academy Awards, when Frances McDormand won the Best Actress Award, what was the movie called? The movie with the billboard?
3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing.
Which is a wonderful film,
It is.
deep film. I mean, when she asked women to stand up, like, hey y'all, can't y'all see that women are here and are directors and, you know, all these different positions in the industry? Why are they not being paid the same thing? You know what I'm saying? And why are they not being given opportunities? It makes no sense. It makes no sense. And so I say to y'all, yes, Barack, yes, Serena, yes, Venus, yes, Frances McDormand, but what we should do is shout out as many names as possible over and over again, you know, and that's what I want to do. So when people talk about leadership, I say April Silver in New York, I say Kapenda Arced in Atlanta, Georgia, Ed Garnes, Atlanta, Georgia, I say Davy D in the Bay Area. I want to, you know, I say Melina Abdullah, Sister Melina Abdullah in LA, you know, I say people who are out there who folks may not know. But like, let's make sure people know that there's a range of people. It's like almost like saying that Malcolm X and Dr. King were the only people. Well, what about Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker? You know what I mean? They're equally important.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so I want it to be a mighty chorus of names and not put anyone up on a pedestal, because I believe that also part of it is that Barack is subject to the same celebrity obsession that we've had in this country for at least the last couple of decades, you know, where people don't even want to have any critical conversations about what was right and what was wrong.
Right.
You know, I love the fact that he talked about the prison industrial complex. I love the fact that he was the first sitting president to visit a prison, you know, which meant a lot. But also, I cringe at the number of bombs that were dropped on people when he was president.
Right.
And I cringe at the fact that his administration kicked more people out of the country as immigrants than any other presidency up until that point. This is not me speaking. This is actually documented.
Yes, it's statistics.
But if we don't read, yo, we need Barack back. I'm like, well, what we don't need is policy that is destructive to any segment of this population.
Right.
You know what I mean? This should be about the people being lifted up. That's what I want to see, you know?
Well, you know, now that we've stepped into the political arena,
Yes, ma'am.
this new crop of
Yeah.
politicians that we've been speaking about
Yes, ma'am.
are considered to be progressives, and they have a different vision that I believe a vision that would be supported by Barack Obama, but with policies and an approach to policy that is vastly different
Who are you talking
from
about?
what we saw from his presidency.
Who are you talking about?
But there is, we've got a new administration
Here in Philadelphia. Okay.
In the office of the president, and
Brother Kevin.
you said pedestals, so I want to start there and move backwards.
Yes, ma'am.
In Charlottesville
Yes,
last
ma'am.
year,
Yes, ma'am.
the chant that was offered by those torch-bearing folks was, "We will not be erased."
Mm.
And so we've talked about representation.
Yeah.
And your book, the last phrase in the title of your book is "The Last Stand of the Angry White Man."
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how you process the idea that by taking down statues,
Yeah.
erasure is happening, or what else is being conflated within that dialogue, within that occurrence, that has made this so frothy-mouthed fanatical about the response that we are seeing since November 8th, 2016.
It's about values, what you value. I value people. I don't value statues and memorials and street signs. I value people. If y'all go back to, and someone help me out there, Erykah Badu had a song years back, "They Won't Be Naming No Buildings After
Yes.
Me." What song was that, y'all? AD
Yes.
2000, thank you so much. And I feel what Erykah was saying is that, are we going to value people or are we going to value things?
Things, yes.
And my value system is not predicated on things, but in this country, historically, and in the Western world, as they call it, there's a value around monuments and statues and things, even if those things are made up, like Columbus
Yes.
as a explorer.
Yes.
Which we know that Columbus was actually a terrorist who helped to commit genocide against masses of indigenous people, him and
Yes.
other so-called explorers. But we were told a lie that he was this great hero. And so what they're trying to protect in places like Charlottesville are a whole stack of lies. Because if you take those lies away, it's like when you remember the movie The Wizard of Oz and the book The Wizard of Oz, and when you get behind the curtain, wow, The Wizard of Oz ain't that dope after all. You know what I mean? And so I think that that's what you see happening because they've been taught, just like all of us, if we grew up in the American society, we've been taught a whole bunch of lies. Washington was the father of the country. Well, what they leave out is that he fathered a lot of slaves as well, it was a slave master.
There's a reason why Washington is the blackest surname in the nation. Just meditate on that for me. And that's another statistic. That's true.
Isn't that crazy? That's profound. But I think that any group that has invested so much violence and hatred and ignorance and fear in maintaining power and privilege, is going to be terrified if people raise their voices up and say enough of this.
Yeah.
And how dare you, if you're Bree Newsom, to go climb up a pole to try to take down a Confederate. Who do you think you are? Well, who do y'all think y'all are to enslave my people, African people, for a couple of centuries, commit mass genocide against my people, and then have just 12 years of what they call Reconstruction from 1865 to 1877, and then another 100 years of legalized segregation, which was domestic terrorism, including my great-grandfather who was killed because he had the audacity as a black man to have 400 acres of land in the low country of South Carolina, took all that land away and killed him. You know what I'm saying? And here we are saying, you know what, enough of this, enough of these lies, enough of these holidays, enough of these statues.
Yes.
We're not going to celebrate this stuff any longer. This is unacceptable. And I understand that things like the 4th of July and Memorial Day, and Thanksgiving are ways for us to get together as people, as families. I support families coming together. But I also will sit there and say to people, hey, Memorial Day was actually created by black Civil War soldiers after the Civil War. you know, and then it was manipulated and taken away as if black folks didn't have anything to do with this. You know, I'm not going to sit there and celebrate the 4th of July and ignore the fact that my people were actually slaves as y'all in New York and Philadelphia were declaring your independence. You know what I'm saying? Which is why Frederick Douglass, and I'm actually working on a film about Frederick Douglass right now, he gave that incredible speech about what the 4th of July means to the Negro. You know what I mean? And he was free. He could have been like, I'm good, son. Let me stay free over here. But he was like, no. You know what? I need to say something. And I mean, the fact that Frederick Douglass said it to a group of white feminist women in the early 1850s was his way of also saying, hey, as I'm supporting you all around women's rights, which he was doing as one of the only men in America of any race in the 1800s to support women's rights, the women's right to vote, etc., those same white sisters were not supporting black people as equals.
Yes.
This is all documented. And then Thanksgiving, my gosh, you know, I mean, what can you say? I mean, you know, we're celebrating the slaughter of indigenous people.
Yeah.
We're celebrating the slaughter of indigenous people. It's plain and simple. You know what I mean? So I just can't sit there and comfortably have turkey. I'm a vegan, so I won't be having turkey, but I'm just saying. Or, you know, just eat and watch football as if nothing ever happened.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so people are, what you see happening with white sisters and brothers who are racist to their core is they're upset that women of all races and backgrounds and people of color are saying this has been built on a pack of lies. In my book, I take a lot of time talking about history, you know, and I want to acknowledge one of the people that I love is a Jewish brother named Howard Zinn, who as a young man, a white brother in the 1960s, participated in the civil rights movement. And Howard Zinn realized, man, I'm around these incredible black people. I see all this black genius. I didn't learn any of this. You know what I mean? And Howard Zinn ended up becoming one of our greatest and most important historians during his lifetime. And I tell everybody, probably one of the most important books you could ever read is called The People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. And here's a white brother who said, I'm not going to write this book from the perspective of monuments and statues and explorers and conquerors. I want to write this book from the perspective of the people who have been victimized by all this stuff. That takes a serious kind of courage, y'all. And that's what you mentioned progressive, that's what a progressive is to me. Yeah. Because you actually want to see progress happen. You know what I mean? Liberals and conservatives are actually very similar because they don't really want to see progress happen.
No.
They want to hold on to power and privilege.
Yeah.
But a progressive wants to see progress happen.
Yeah. And so in this moment, we have 2 months until we are once again, almost 2 months to the day, until we are once again challenged to move beyond apathy or anger or whatever else we feel about the process and the system in this nation.
Yes, ma'am.
To have a statement about leadership, elected leadership in this country. And, you know, there's a lot of conversation on the websites and major magazines and publications about this being a referendum about Trump. That how well, whether there's a shift of the balance of power in Congress and which candidates do well in this is more of a statement about how people feel about the president than perhaps how they feel about the individual candidates. And this is a cycle that gets a lot of people very riled up. And so I think there is more emotional investment in this midterm than we have seen in a very long time.
Yes, ma'am.
And how do you suggest we take this next 2 months and sort of process where we are in this moment in history?
Wow, you ask great questions. I mean, there's 2 ways I want to answer this. The first way I want to answer it by, I think about that Einstein quote about insanity saying the same thing and doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Yeah.
I say that to say I'm old enough to have remember the Reagan years, you know, very intimately. And you know, I remember Reagan, I remember Bush father, I remember Bill Clinton, I remember, you know, Bush the son, and obviously Barack. And I got to tell you, as a political animal and someone who majored in political science when I was in college at Rutgers University, I'm struck, and I say that in the last essay as well, how so many of the speeches that I hear from Democrats and Republicans sound exactly like the 1980s. You know what I mean? The same kind of phrasing, exactly. And so that says to me that, you know, what ends up happening every 2 years or 4 years is this game is played with the American people where there's this pretension of this kind of stuff that's going to change everything, but it's always back to business as usual. There's a small group of people that have power. It's called an oligarchy. And then the rest of us are, you know, petrified, you know, all over the place. And, you know, I'll say what someone said to me recently, you know, I go ask my mama because she's the foremost political theorist that I know. And it's really about, you know, do I have food on the plate? Can I pay the bills? You know, am I okay? I think that people should vote. You know, I mean, many people in this room know there's a time when your folks did not have the right to vote. If you're a woman, if you're someone who's barely 18, if you happen to be any group of people that didn't have the vote at some time, you know what I'm talking about. But I think one of the mistakes that's happened since the 1960s to the present is that, let me put it to you like this. How many of y'all have had a repair person come to your home with a toolbox? Okay, with a toolbox. How would you feel if that repair person came to your house with a toolbox and the only tool in the toolbox was a screwdriver? One tool, just one thing. And it's supposed to be there to fix a whole bunch of stuff. You say that again?
I said, yo, you gotta be on your job.
You would want the repair person to have a screwdriver, a hammer, some pliers, a few things. Am I right?
Gotta be on his job.
Gotta be on, or her job, or their job, right?
Right.
So what I'm saying to you all, with all due respect to people in this room who are citizens, is that I think the first thing is that we have reduced leadership just to voting and the political process. You know what I mean? And I'm saying to you all, that's a huge mistake. I'm even saying that as someone who ran for office in 2008 and 2010, Congress. And I support people who are running for office. I said at the very beginning, I listed names of people that I know that I support. You know what I mean? But one of the things I realize is that a lot of us only show up, and that's not even a lot of us, every 2 years, every 4 years. Barely half the country even votes for the presidential election.
Right.
In New York City, where I live, I don't know how it is here in Philadelphia, but maybe 30% of the folks who actually are eligible to vote even vote for the mayor every 4 years.
20% is a good day
20%.
here.
And so I feel like, you know, let me say this, you know, it's important that we understand that leadership is a range of things.
Yes.
You know, now, do I think people should get out there and put forth a referendum on Donald Trump? Absolutely. I want to make that very clear. This is destructive to this country. I've never seen it this bad, and I lived through the Reagan years, which was horrific to me.
Right.
You know what I mean? This is some other level, because the man is insane. He's incompetent. He's not qualified. You know what I mean? And the only reason why he's there is because of his race and his power and his gender and his privilege. Hillary Clinton was clearly the superior candidate. I mean, what else did First Lady, Secretary of State, United States Senator, lawyer, you know what I mean? Nonprofit organization. I mean, but I'm gonna tell y'all, I knew that he was gonna win. About a week before the election happened, 2016, I was in Washington State. I was in an Uber in Washington State. And I had a cab driver, a white brother, and I said, he didn't know me from Canopy. I said, what do you think about Hillary Clinton? You know what he said? Hillary Clinton is a Muslim Marxist. And she's going to turn the country Muslim Marxist. And I said, word? That's what's going to happen?
That's what's happening out in these streets? Yeah.
That's what's going to happen? We're going to be Muslim Marxists? Even though Muslims believe in God, Allah, and Marxists don't believe in God. They're atheists, you know what I'm saying? At least my friends who are Marxists are.
How you even connected to?
Well, but if you don't read, if you don't study,
Right.
you don't travel.
And it's before Alex Jones got censored from Twitter.
You know what I'm saying? And so, but I'm saying to you all, we can get caught up and paranoid in every 2 years, every 4 years, but I think the real issue here is the incredible gross ignorance of people in this country, you know, which speaks to the educational system, the mass media culture that I've been a part of, and it promotes all the divisions that we see. Why is there racism? Why is there sexism? Why is there homophobia, transphobia, classism, anti-Semitism, Islamic phobia, you know, disrespect for disabled people? Why is there all this hatred against immigrants, you know? I mean, because people are profoundly ignorant.
Yes.
Yes.
And when you're profoundly ignorant, you just fall into your little box. You know what I mean? And not only do you not know anything about yourself, You don't know anything about anyone else.
Right.
And then people who come along who only care about power and privilege can say, you can be a Democrat or you can be a Republican. It could be a red state, it could be a blue state, but none of it has anything to do ultimately with your humanity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And how do we bring people together?
Yep.
And so, I mean, am I going to publicly say on social media, hey, y'all should vote? Absolutely. But I'm too old, and I've been in this political game too long, you know, to say to people that this is actually the ticket to freedom.
Right.
If you vote. And I think it's insulting to people's intelligence to say that voting is the only solution.
Right.
No, we need to organize. We need to build institutions like Uncle Bobbies. We need to have spaces where people can come together and have conversations like this. We need to be able to. We need to sell books that people will read. You know what I mean? We need to have authors being supported, artists being supported. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you know, it's a whole range of things. And for black people specifically for a second, you know, our leadership has been reduced to politicians and preachers, which is dangerous, which is absolutely dangerous. You know, it's like this one-stop shop. The black preacher or the black politician, sometimes the preacher and politician are the same person. Right. And so what I'm getting at is that this is dangerous, you all. It's no danger. It's just as dangerous as Jerry Falwell and the conservative right-wing Christians controlling things around the country. You know what I mean? Why would I want to have, I don't care, and no disrespect to anyone, I've been a Muslim and a Christian in my lifetime, so I respect spirituality.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But if you're not a well-rounded spiritual person who can articulate about economics and politics and spirituality and religion, and you have a healthy sense of self, but also can relate to people who are different than you, why would I follow you as a leader? Which brings me to the definition of leadership. A real leader changes the conversation. You don't say the same stuff over and over again. Yeah. You know what I mean? You don't do the same stuff over and over again. Leaders build institutions, organizations, businesses that support the community. That's leadership. You know what I mean? A leader, she, he, they, however you identify yourself, you know yourself, whatever your bloodlines are. It's like when I was at Westchester University 2 weeks ago, here in PA, you know, students got out and some students said, well, I'm just white. I'm like, well, what were you before you became white? You know what I mean? Where did your people come from? You have a responsibility to understand, you know, that whiteness was a concept that was created to perpetuate white supremacy. Yep. You know what I mean? And so we're going to strip you of being Italian. We're going to strip you of being Polish, of being Irish. We're going to put you in this box being called white. We're going to force you to think like an Anglo-Saxon, which was the foundation of this country. Go watch Scorsese's film, Gangs of New York. Notice how the native whites treated the foreign whites, just like they treat Mexican immigrants. Y'all feel what I'm saying? You know what I mean? And so this is actually not new. You know what I mean? Separating children, that was slavery. Right. That was Japanese being interned during the World War II. You know, that's how Jewish people were treated during the Holocaust. Y'all feel what I'm saying? Yeah. And so, I'm saying that we've got to be more sophisticated and not just think about voting as the only way to do something, but we also have to figure out, well, what are the other tools that we need to have in the toolbox of leadership? And then what can I do? If I'm a filmmaker, then I'll make my films. Like, I'm very clear that Ryan Coogler, who created not just Black Panther, but Fruitville Station, yes, and Creed 2, Creed 1, I'm sorry, the first Creed, that's leadership. He's using his art as leadership. You know, when I see my wife and the women who are working with her around She, a choreo play, which is about ending violence against women and girls, and the talkbacks that they've had night after night, I'm like, that's leadership. We're going to bring these women together. We're not going to just talk about what has happened to us, #MeToo, which we should do, but also how do we move toward healing and empowerment as women. Y'all feel what I'm saying? Yes. That's leadership. You know what I mean? Because otherwise people will have you chasing your tail over and over again, having the same conversations back to Einstein. And I refuse, we act like Civil Rights Bill happened in '64, the Voting Rights Act happened in '65. Did Dr. King just drop dead after that? There was 3 more years of his life. Yep. Well, what did he do in those 3 years? Organize. He started talking about economic injustice. He started organizing something called the Poor People's Campaign. He came out against militarism in the Vietnam War. You know, he said a lot of the same things that another courageous person, Dwight Eisenhower, said when he left the presidency, when Kennedy became president. We got to check this militarism, this violence, this dropping bombs on people. And Eisenhower was a World War II hero saying this. You know what I mean? So I just want to encourage us as leaders, because everyone in this room is a leader. Stop putting individuals on pedestals, not me, not Mark Lamont Hill, not the people you see on TV, not the people who write books. Everyone in this room is a leader in their own way. We just have to do something. Find something that you're passionate about, yep, you know what I mean? And build your toolbox so it's not just a screwdriver. You know what I'm saying? It's a range of things.
Yeah. I want to be mindful of people's time, but I want to bring us back to the book just a bit, and to the journey, the growth. The fact that your wife's piece speaks about violence against women is also something that along your personal journey you've been very open about, that you write about in this book. There was a time when in your path and in your evolution you caught yourself in the midst of that level of physical disrespect to someone you cared about.
1991.
And I was going to say, you know, you can kind of preview it. People, you can read about it more in depth in the book, but the necessity for claiming that moment of your life and the beginning of the realization that you are now continuing to move through.
I just don't want my manhood to be defined by violence physically, spiritually, emotionally, verbally, and we all have to check ourselves. I still check myself, and not physically, that's not ever going to happen again, but in other ways. And I just think that, you know, something we talked about, there's a journalist here in Philadelphia who was quite hostile, you know, to me in an interview. And I just said to myself, this is toxic manhood. This person may be successful and famous in Philadelphia, but this is toxic manhood. I could not imagine coming up to another person, especially a black male. I mean, I look at black males, I'm looking in the mirror. If you do well, I do well. Why would I tear you down? You know what I'm saying? But if you're engaging in toxic manhood, then you tear people down. And I mean, like to me, you know, it was women who stepped to me, especially sisters from Spelman. There was a couple of progressive brothers, men, you know, in the early 90s who said, you know what, Kevin Powell, how can you talk all this stuff about racism and then you actually, in some form, participate in the oppression of half the population, the community's population? You're a hypocrite. You're a hypocrite. You know what I'm saying? You're a hypocrite. And so I had to begin to rethink some things. And I realized, even in spite of going to college for 4 years, you know, I never took a gender studies class, never took a women's studies class. I was so quick to take black studies classes, but guess what? Just like I didn't know anything about black history, I knew nothing about women's history. You know what I mean? I know I got a mama. I know I got aunts. I know I got a grandmother. I would hear things about their stories, but you know, just like we didn't learn anything about black people or Latino people or Asian people, Native American people in the school system K through 12. It doesn't matter if you went to private schools or public schools. A miseducation is a miseducation.
Yes, sir.
You know, I also barely learned anything about women. You know, I smiled when we were driving here and it said, you're not going to go across, is it the Betsy Ross Bridge? Am I right? I learned about Betsy Ross sewing a flag. I'm sure she did way more than that. But we
She
have
didn't
no.
even sew the flag.
You see what I'm saying? You learn about, you learn vaguely about Helen Keller. You learn vaguely about Rosa Parks not giving up her seat, and that's the totality of the education you get about women. So why wouldn't you go to college, or even if you don't go to college, and not be engaged in behavior that's destructive to women and girls?
Right.
You know, why would you not participate? Why would you even question rape culture? You know, why would you even question violence? I can't say what happened to me the other day, but I'll just say this. I was around a group of a whole bunch of males who spoke about domestic violence as if they were just putting on their socks, just casually, like it was no big deal, you know? And it was profound, you know, how many openly admitted that they beat women, that they slap women, and how easily we call women bitchs and thoughts and all the stuff that we say, you know? And so I'll say it again, especially since there's a number of men here, even if you're not the kind of man who would ever call a woman out of her name, disrespect her, grab her in a club, or put your arm around her inappropriately, like the pastor at the Aretha Franklin funeral, put his hand around Ariana Grande, cupping her breast. You know what I mean? Then what did I do? Well, bro, it's on camera, so you don't have to apologize for this. And just be clear, it was women ministers who challenged this, you know what I mean? Because I love Aretha Franklin, but we cannot deny that a lot of that funeral was very rooted in toxic manhood. It was very patriarchal, you know what I'm saying? Even if you're not the kind of man who would do any of that kind of stuff in your fraternity, I'm in a fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha, you know, I'm like, I go to colleges all the time. I say to my Alpha brothers, if you're promoting your parties, and the only way you can know how to promote the party is to put women naked on the flyer, you think that's cool, you know, even if you're not the kind of man who would ever hit a woman, kick a woman, beat a woman, set her on fire, all the stories that I've heard around the country that women have had to deal with, you know, and God forbid, if you're not the kind of man who would ever rape or kill a woman, but you actually have men around you who engage in this behavior and you say nothing about it at all, you become just as guilty. It's really simple. It's really simple. And that's what I had to come reckon with over these last 25 years. And what women said to me, everyone, and especially the men here who identify men as men here, is that you have to become re-educated. You know, you need to go read Eve Ensler and Gloria Steinem and Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde and Nikki Giovanni and Sonia Sanchez and all these incredible women. You need to read Toni Cade Bambar's great anthology, you know, The Black Woman, Toni Cade out of Philadelphia. You need to pay attention to, you know, and support people like Aisha Shaida Simmons, who's from Philadelphia,
Yes.
her documentary, No. You know what I'm saying? You know, because I felt like I realized that there's a whole population of the world I knew nothing about. Does that make sense, y'all? Mm-hmm. You know, and when you start to read about people who are not you, you just don't get knowledge and wisdom, but you also begin to develop something called compassion and empathy.
Yes, sir.
You know what I'm saying? And so we as men, and I still struggle with that. My wife will challenge me and other women will challenge me, and I have to think about things. Because I'm thinking through the lens of male privilege. I'm clear about that. You just don't stop being a sexist. We are all washed in sexism.
Yeah. And that brings me back to the final note, which is the first part of the title of your book, Your Mother.
Ma.
I lost my mom when I was 11.
I
And
didn't know
so
that. Wow.
entering adulthood without having that sounding board and that guide and everything else that mothers represent has been a journey for me. And so I take particular comfort in a way of you being so open about how you are dealing with watching your mother age and watching the challenges that she's going through and the opportunity, though, that you have in the midst of this observance and interaction with still being able to ask questions, still being able to process some of the other growth and journey that you've been through the lens of your aging mother.
Yeah.
And how that gives you a different perspective on the world in being able to have that. And so as you continue this journey and as we see these times continuing to evolve around us, what do you hope you will continue to have sit very present with you about how your relationship with your mother has evolved?
It is, it's very difficult to watch your parent be sick, to age dramatically, to know that there actually are ways to heal out there, but because they're stuck in a certain way of thinking, you know, it was very jarring for me, especially my mother just turned 75 this year, and yes, and she, when we went down south, I encountered my oldest living relative, who is 90, and she was full of energy and walking fine and everything. My mother walks with a cane and is in great pain.
Yeah.
You know, put it in context, my mother started working when she was 8 years old, picking cotton in the South. And she worked for 54 years, backbreaking jobs. You know, one of the most intelligent people I've ever met, but formerly an 8th grade education, which means there were certain jobs that were there, basically factory, be the help, you know. And the last job she had for 25 years, she was a proud member of one of our great labor unions, 1199. She was a home health care worker. And what I did not know, because I was so caught up in my life, you know, trying to be a writer, writing for Vibe, running around the country, chasing Tupac and Snoop and Dre and whoever, you know. I didn't know that my mother was actually falling down in the snow, going to work in Jersey City where I was born and raised, and would get up, as black women do, because y'all are powerful, y'all are beautiful, y'all are powerful, y'all are beautiful, y'all keep going, you know what I mean? Even if it hurts you, you know what I mean? And I didn't realize until, you know, the last couple of years that all that falling down and working in the snow had given my mother severe arthritis. Her hands are swollen, her ankles are swollen. I took her to my doctor in Brooklyn, a holistic doctor. He said, literally, your insides have frozen, you know. And then you add to that, you know, a lot of us, you know, we eat the food that we eat, and there's no judgment, no judgment, because I understand that the food that we eat makes us happy, you know what I mean? We want our soul food, you know what I mean? Because it's like, you know, we want our Caribbean food, we want our African food, because it makes us happy. We want our Italian food, it makes us happy. But we have to realize that, and I've seen this with black folks and Latino folks and white folks as well, a lot of the food that we eat helps to create diabetes, high blood pressure, you know, all kinds of health ailments. And so it's been difficult. Here I am, you know, hip hop, hippie, yogi, vegan, skateboarder dude over here, you know, like, you know, talking about tofu and whatnot. My mom's just like, nah, son, we ain't eating none of that. You know what I'm saying? She's saying stuff to me like, he just eats air and eats carrots. So you find humor in it because my mom's just saying crazy stuff to me. And meanwhile, she's pulling a Swanson TV dinner out of the freezer at the supermarket. Don't front, though. It was good when we was growing up. Remember the Salisbury steak with the biscuit, with the brownie? Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
I wish I didn't remember, but I do.
Remember Sloppy Joe's? Oh my God.
And Swanson's commercials.
Exactly. But it's painful to watch the person who you believe, you know, even with her issues. My mom is very opinionated, very unfiltered and raw and real. Like a black female Archie Bunker, if y'all remember him. You know, she said some crazy stuff about black folks and white folks and all folks all the time, just random stuff. And sometimes I'm like, man, we need to censor this, you know, but you can't censor it, you know what I mean? And so I've learned to see the beauty in all of it. I realized there's beautiful poetry coming out, and Brother Conan tell you, my mother has permeated a lot of my work, you know, because she's an amazing storyteller, and I am who I am. It was my mother who took me to the library when I was 8 years old, and it's the reason why I'm a writer, because she brought me around books.
Yes.
And she doesn't read any books herself, but she, you know, something in her said, I need to have my son around books. You know what I mean? And the first books I read were sports books, which is why I love sports so much. And then because my mother just let me roam, I started making my way over to other kinds of books, you know what I'm saying? And so I owe a debt to her. It's because of her that I take education seriously to this day, because she instilled in me a love of learning.
Yes.
Because she didn't get it herself. It was denied to her because of the racism and the sexism and the poverty that she grew up in. Y'all know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so, you know, it's profound to see this person, you know, and then you find yourself in a club that you didn't want to be a part of, which is the Caretaker Club.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you find yourself navigating rides for your mother when you're not in town to take her grocery shopping and make sure she gets her hair done, and do you need to get your nails done? And even though me and my wife were tired, we've been having a hard year, you know, we had to drive mama down south, and mama drove us crazy, and my wife Jenna, she drove us crazy. Because it ain't no joke riding in the car with your mama for 12, 13 hours. Well, actually, it was supposed to have been a 12-hour trip that turned into like 21 hours. Because we had to stop several times because mama had to go to the bathroom and things like that. Exactly. It was like Aretha didn't fly either. Mama ain't never been on no plane. She ain't never getting on no plane. And, you know, but you know, but I also understood how important it was for my mother to go back to where she came from. Because she doesn't know how many times she'll be able to do that again. You know, and it hurts you when your mother starts saying things to you like, when she says things to you like,
Take your time.
you act like I'm gonna be here forever. And it's like, you know, it's interesting because I'll tell you a funny story. It was so important for me for my mother to see me. My wife and I got married in June of last year, and the Cohens were there, and it was so important for me to see my mother see me get married, because she used to say, "Boy, you ain't never get married. You can't stay in no relationship. No one gonna marry you." And I was like, "Damn, is it like that?" You know what I'm saying? And right when, am I right, Jenna? Are you still back there? Right when we were about to do the I do's, I noticed my mama getting up and going to the bathroom because she had to go to the bathroom. And so she and my Aunt Kathy missed us getting married. And we're at a church, this great church in Manhattan, and we were like up on the thing, the altar. Is it the altar? The altar.
Yeah.
And we were like, do we stop the wedding? Or do we just get married? We got married, but I was like, and my mother's like, I was there, that's all right. You know what I'm saying? So even in the midst of the sickness, you find these moments. And you know, myself and Brother Cohen and some other folks have been working hard to get this other book, The Education of KEVIN Powell, turned into a TV show, because I want to tell a story of not just me, but my mom and people that come from this community.
Yes.
And you know, working class people. You know what I mean? Working class people. You know what I'm saying? That's important to me, and not in a comedy form. You know, in a drama. In drama. You know what I'm saying? So. That's it. And I know we got to sign books and stuff, but thank you for asking that question.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, you know, we're here, and I'll take a few liberties if you all don't mind, just to say that.
Is this for me?
Yes.
Was I crying? No, I'm kidding.
It's all right.
Indeed.
What's your name? I need you as my therapist.
But I'm glad you mentioned the television show and working towards that. The fact that we immediately know that the biography of Tupac is coming.
Yes. I promise.
As a new project.
Yes.
But we need storytellers.
Yeah. Yeah.
We talk about representation, and that, of course, is important.
Yeah.
Who we see on the screen, and feeling that we are valued because we see ourselves in these spaces.
Yeah.
But there are so many stories to tell. Everyone in this room has multiple stories inside of you about the elders in your family,
Yes.
about you, about your children,
Yeah.
that we need to hear consistently. And so I want to say thank you on behalf of everyone
Thank
who's
you.
here to hear from you, to
you.
know that the fact that you have already placed yourself in the role of storyteller and are sharing your personal stories and the encounters
Thank you.
that you have had with us is crucially important to our development and sustaining us as a society, as a humanity.
Thank you.
And so keep doing what you do.
We can't ask we can't have no questions.
Hi, my name is Brenda Janier, and I live in G-Town. Yeah, Germantown, right here, right around the corner. And I'm glad to be supporting Uncle Bobbies and you as well. And so I hope I articulate this question right. You mentioned, this is something I grapple with. You mentioned how there are, you say like, you're the example, and there are more articulate Black people than you are, okay? But when do we stop always having to be the example? Because, and when I say I grapple with it, like I go to work every day. I show up on time. I do everything the right way. I hold my tongue, you know, sometimes when it's, you know, I just do, and I work hard. And then I see other cultures and other people in our culture that, I mean, I'm from the old school, so I'm going to work hard anyway. But they just don't follow that same example. And then I guess I'm sort of rambling on, but do you follow where I'm going with that? And why are we always having to be the example all the time? So I understood what you're saying, like there's more articulate people than you, but what are we always trying to prove ourselves?
There's a lot there, and I really want to thank you for what you just said. A couple things. The first thing that popped out of my mind is the phrase self-care. Self-care. The second word that came to my mind was excellence. I want to, if I could respond with those two words. Self-care, I think that, and we all are, I work hard too. Remember I said my mother started working at 8? Well, when I got 8, she said, boy, go bag some groceries. I haven't stopped working since. I mean, I'm constantly working. I feel like I need to sleep more, even though I've tried to take naps every day. I think that we've got to practice self-care. And I just want to ask rhetorically, what do y'all do out there to take care of yourselves as you're doing all of this so you don't run yourselves into the ground, you know, trying to, I mean, especially if you're a person of color, if you're a woman of any race, if you're any group that has been marginalized in some way, you know, you have to be conscious of the fact that, yeah, people are going to come to you as an example because, you know, especially if you're right in front of them, like, well, we need you to represent this group. You are the walking diversity, whatever your identity is, you know what I mean? But you also got to carve out time for yourself. And so I don't know what you do, but like, of what? Walking. That's great. If you're able to walk, yes, ma'am. Yes. Good, good. Then the second part of it, I actually am with you. I think that we've had a terrible dumbing down in this country across all races. I think that there's a lack of respect for excellence. You know what I mean? And I was raised in a certain kind of way, not just by my mother, but the people around me in my community, that you have to excel at what you do. You know, whatever it is that you do, you need to be excellent at it. my wife and I fired an intern this summer who had a college degree, and this is not the first time we've had people like this who are just okay with being mediocre.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
What James Baldwin said it best. James Baldwin said it. Many of us make peace with mediocrity.
Yes.
You know, and when you have this incredible dumbing down in our country, and part of it has to do with these gadgets, which again, I dig my phone and I can use it for a range of things, but nothing takes the place of like a book or a newspaper or a magazine or an actual article. I mean, I'll write a blog that's 2,000 words. Kev, that's way too long. I can't read all that, bro. I'm like, my God, you know, I was raised up reading 500-page books, man. You know what I'm saying? Or if the movie's that movie's too slow. If it's not bombing things and cars flipping over, this is boring. I'm like, this is not boring. This is great art, man. You feel what I'm saying? And it's like, I think that we do have to be examples. You know, even when I get exhausted the way you're describing and feeling like, wow, do I have to be the role model all over and over again? I just think about all the people that came before me. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, imagine a Harriet Tubman or a Frederick Douglass who didn't even have the luxury of a whole bunch of people around them. It was like, there was them, you know, and they had to excel. Like if Harriet Tubman wasn't excellent as a leader, as a visionary, as a strategist, she would have gotten caught as she was going back to free other people. And so I stand on her shoulder, but she also got, after what they don't talk about is after slavery, all the institutions she built in places like upstate New York. Yeah. You know, when I think about Frederick Douglass, I was like, here's a man who taught himself how to read and write as a child while a slave, you know what I'm saying? And when he escaped from slavery, you know, became a freedom seeker. I mean, this man did all this incredible stuff, just like Harriet Tubman did incredible stuff. That's excellence, and I want to aspire to that, you know what I mean? And I do think that our communities need those examples. I do believe that, you know, even when it's exhausting. And that's why I also think it's important when you feel tired or I feel tired, I'm like, well, y'all need to check out this person over here. You know, and I see my sister Rochelle Payne right next to you. You know, when I was with was it 2 or 3 years ago, I was with the say the name of your organization so folks will.
National Black Public Relations Society.
I mean, I know black publicists, but when I went to that conference, I was like, these folks are dynamic. And there's a whole bunch of folks, you know what I mean? All over the country doing this dynamic work because it was excellence, you know, and commitment. And I think, and it inspired me because this is not my field. I'm not a publicist, but I was like, I want to be like them. This is how you do it. You know what I'm saying? And I do think we need that because otherwise people will just sink down into mediocrity. And what we said to the young lady that we had to let go to some, I don't believe in just throwing away young people. I think that's dangerous. You know, we said, well, these are things you need to read. These are some things you need to watch. Here's some things you need to do, because we also have to understand some people simply don't know what to do, which is why we do have to be examples. You know what I mean? And so when I read Malcolm X's autobiography, for example, I realized when I finished that book, one of the things that Malcolm did in those 7 years of prison, he read a lot.
Yes,
he read a lot. And he always carried around a pen. So I started, as an 18-year-old, I started carrying a pen around. I was like, I need to write stuff down like Malcolm did. Malcolm said he always was aware of time, so I'm checking my time over here. I got all that stuff from Malcolm X because he left an example of how you can be successful, how you can be excellent. You feel what I'm saying? Yeah. Yeah, but and you take those breaks. When I say the breaks too, it's not just like my wife and I did yoga this morning, 90 minutes of that. But at the end of the year, we take 2 to 3 week vacation. Like we shut it down. Like a lot of us don't do that. One of the things I admire about Europeans and folks from Australia and folks from Japan, I mean, they like got built-in holidays, a month, 2 months. I'm like, and y'all getting paid for that too over there? They're like, yup. And whereas we have to wait till we're retired, then we'll go on our trips now. I'm like, it shouldn't just be when we're retired. Yeah. Like Americans should be given time to take off. You know what I mean? So we can actually not feel the weight that you're describing, because I felt it when you said it. Yeah. I agree. But I think we have to fight for that time. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yes, hello, my name's Jeff Jones, and I'm host of Higher Ground Radio Talk Show. Thank you for all your inspiring work and the great things that you're doing, and thank you for coming to Philadelphia. You're welcome. My question is, you talked about symbolism. How do we move from symbolism to substance to make that change in our communities? Because again, sometimes we just settle for shallow symbolisms and we don't move that to substance, so we don't really get a change, but we'll celebrate that symbolism and nothing really happens to make a difference. So how do we move from symbolism to substance? Because I do understand and appreciate what you do say, and I believe it, that we do need those symbols, but we have to move from just being symbolistic in our thinking to actually moving to substance to make that impactful change in our communities.
I'm going to say it again. We're sitting in it. Uncle Bobbies, Uncle Bobbies, Uncle Bobbies. I've known Mark Lamont Hill for a long time. I've had the honor of working with Isabel and Genevieve, correct? You know, and this is substance. This is substance. You know what I'm saying? I didn't even think about any other space to be in Philadelphia. There's a lot of places. People ask me to come to other places. I was like, no, I want to come here because here's folks that have been doing the intellectual work. You know, y'all know what Mark does as a public intellectual, as a writer, et cetera. You know, clearly Uncle Bobbies is influenced by someone who was in his family, am I right? Yes. A real Uncle Bobby, am I right? You know, which says there's a respect for the elders, those who came before us. I'm going to name something after this person. Then I'm going to create this space, you know, that is a collective space. So this is substance. This is proof of it. And no one's stopping any of us from creating stuff that we want to see. You know, if I can single my wife out one more time, you know, a few years ago, she talked about the work that she wanted to do. It became a choreo play, which is turned into a curriculum, which is turning into a day of healing and empowerment next in October, which is turning into a range of things because, you know, one, have a vision, and then two, have the courage to execute that vision. You know what I mean? And even if you don't know how to do stuff, you figure it out along the way, which is where the excellence comes in, because I think whatever you do, you need to study it. You just can't just jump, I'm going to start a nonprofit. You've never worked at a nonprofit, you know, have no idea. You got to actually study the world you're going to go into. But I think that, you know, to me, it's not rocket science at all. It's just like, we have to do it. A lot of us just talk, but I'm like, what is it that we actually want to build and create? Create and build, as Ras Baraka said, you know, in a poem years ago. Ras Baraka, the current mayor of Newark, who's the son of Amina and Mary Baraka, build and create something, you know, that means to you. When I visited Tuskegee for the first time last year, or 2 years ago, Tuskegee University, which was Tuskegee Institute, started by Booker T. Washington. The thing that was striking to me was here's an institution that is still around, and it's like all this land and all this amazing stuff that he and George Washington Carver did at this school. I'm like, this is profound. And the generations that were educated, just like the generations educated at Lincoln and Cheney and Howard and Spelman and Morehouse, I'm like, someone had a vision and it's still operating. That's leadership. You know what I'm saying? So I just say do something. If you're in the media, you know, and you don't like what's happening in media, create your own publication. You know what I'm saying? Why not? Why can't you? You know, my wife created her own theater production. Why can't you? Why not? You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you coming to Philadelphia. I just want to, my name is Andrea. I'm a social worker, and I'm glad that you spoke on domestic violence because I am a domestic violence counselor. I'm always on the hotline every weekend. And it's very, very hard work, and I'm glad you talked about self-care because one of the things I felt was happening to me with the years that I worked in social service, not just working with adults, women who are beaten by their spouses or family members, but children as well, and young black boys and black girls, you know, suffering from sexual abuse and domestic violence. My mother is a survivor, so that's why I'm really, you know, tirelessly advocate for education. But one of the things I've noticed I'm seeing more now is more women engaging in domestic violence and people not being educated. Not just that women are being beaten, but men are being beaten. And I'm seeing it even in families where I had a family member that I was trying to educate her about the violence that she was inflicting on her mate, but was annoying to it, not immune to it, not understanding it. Right. So where do we go? Yeah. Where do you think we go with this violence that is happening in our society and with a president who has a mentality that is okay? Yeah.
Well, I think again, Americans need to be honest about a few things. The country started violently when settlers came over here and committed genocide against indigenous people, First Nation people who we call Indians, Native Americans. So there's violence from the very beginning. The violence continued when African people were kidnapped from Africa and brought here as slaves. I mean, slavery was violence, period. All of it is a violent institution. And you know, how women have historically been treated in this country, violence. How immigrants have been treated in this country, often violence. You know, the most popular sport in America is football, which is something I grew up loving, but I have to admit now that it is brutally violent. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yep. I just read today about another football player, former football player, who just committed suicide because of the concussion that he got from this violent sport called football and the mental health issues he'd had. And so I think that the violence, the mass shootings in this country, I brace myself every 2 weeks or so for some mass shooting to happen.
Right.
We have over 300 million people in this country. We have over 300 million guns in this country. Since Bobby Kennedy and Dr. King were killed in 1968, at least 1 million people have been killed by guns in this country. That's the size of a city or a nation in some cases. And so, the way we talk to each other is violent. The way many of us treat each other is violent. As we were driving here, I read about how Cardi B attacked Nicki Minaj. You know what I'm saying? Violence. Violence. And so, it's everywhere. I've been violent in my lifetime. I talked about it in this book. She just talked about it. You know what I'm saying? And I grapple with even how I talk about people in these times. H. Rap Brown said famously back in the 60s that violence was as natural as apple pie for a lot of us. Mm-hmm. And I think that until we really start to be, I'll give you an example. I went to Ireland for the first time about 4 or 5 years ago. I was hanging out with an Irish brother who was a journalist, and we were just kicking it. And I said, man, I was in Dublin. Dublin's a big city like Philadelphia. And I said, bro, I just need to ask, y'all got guns up in this piece? You know what I'm saying? He said, man, barely, And I said, well, does anyone get killed? He said, well, he had to think for a second. He said, well, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, someone got stabbed. I said, one person? He's like, yeah, one person. Just let that marinate for a second. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And that doesn't mean that the Irish or any other people are not, but I think that we have taken it to a whole nother level in America. You know what I mean? When you have a history of people being hung from trees, chokehold to death, vigilantes like George Zimmerman killing Trayvon Martin, while we've been sitting here, there have been women in this country who have been raped while we've been sitting here. Mm-hmm. While we've been sitting here, there have been women in this country who have been raped. There are queer, transgender people who have been killed or attacked, in this country because of who they are. Y'all feel what I'm saying? And so it's become okay for us to just participate in violence. And so I'm not surprised. One of the things that I loved when my wife and I met, we met in a healing space. We met in a yoga class, and we were both very honest. She goes to therapy. She's been to therapy. I've been to therapy. You know what I mean? We immediately, our relationship was about how do we heal? How do we heal? And if we make mistakes, how do we go forward? And I think that that's part of the issue for us, y'all, is that if we, we're always gonna be violent if we don't figure out any other ways to deal with it. I want to deal with peace. I want to deal with love. I want to deal with nonviolence. I want to deal with conflict resolution, and I also want to deal with energy. Something my wife has been working with a lot. What kind of energy are you putting out there? We've been around people who are very negative the last couple of days, and then we were in a space today of such peace and kindness and generosity. Y'all know what I'm saying? Like, what's wrong with being kind? Yeah. Jenna, my wife.
I just want to add to what you were saying because.
Y'all all look back like, who is she?
I just want to add to what he was saying because the world that we perpetuate violence, it's rooted in that, but it's also like he was talking about healing. I mean, the reason all of the domestic violence is expanding and all of the sexual violence, it's our country's rooted in it and it's been expanding, but it's because of we've all been traumatized in some way. And whether that is coming from slavery, whether it's coming from Holocaust, whether it's coming from, Native American genocide, it's all through our history, and then it continues in, larger ways and then in microaggressions. So we all are dealing with this trauma on a daily basis and in a larger sense. And if we don't confront the trauma or actually admit that we're all traumatized in some way, I feel like that one, we have to admit to ourselves, and two, it's all about that love thing that we were talking about. And that's why we both go to yoga, because it was we're rebuilding ourselves and rebuilding our self-love. And the reason there's so much violence, I feel like it comes from a factor of a lack of love, and that's for each other and then for ourselves. And then in terms of in terms of sexual violence or domestic violence, I mean, the abuse, it becomes we need to love our full self and embody our full self. And I feel like we live in a country that is very repressed. And because it's repressed, we're repressed sexually too. And we don't view sex in a loving way. And so many, just riffing off of that, it's not even just about the act of sex. It is about the lovingness and that goes around sex and the relationships. And we need to really start having deeper conversations, not just about sex and sexuality, but about love and the love that initiates that. And I feel like that is what's missing from all of this, like the love for self and the love for each other.
Yes. Wow. You see why I married her? Because if I can end it with this one last thing. My wife said love. I mean, just think about what you love. You know, who do you love and how do you love? You know, I had a white brother send me an email the other day because it was an excerpt of my book it's on the Huffington Post, and the white brother was going off. He said that I was disrespecting Barack Obama and that I was lumping all white folks together, which clearly he missed the point of the book. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because and I love all people. I love my black self, my African self, but I love all people. I love all people. Mm-hmm. You know, but if you really love anything, you also reserve the right to be critical of it. Doesn't mean that you hate it, you just want it to be better. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's the point of all of this. It's like, do we want to get better? Do we want to get well? You know, and I think that's got to be rooted in love. And I used to think that Dr. King and Baldwin were very corny when I was younger intellectually. Like, why are they talking about love so much? But I actually realized love is the answer. Mm-hmm. The problem is most of us don't actually practice love. Yep. You know, even when people say tolerance, I don't even like the word tolerance anymore. I don't want to be tolerated. I want to be respected. Yep. I'd like to be loved. You know what I'm saying? I mean, what's wrong with that? So, thank you.
We love you.
I love y'all. You know, and
because the Reverend that did the
eulogy
wedding spoke on love.
Oh, which wedding?
The royal wedding.
Yes,
the royal wedding. That was a great speech.
Spoke on love.
They should have had him at Aretha Franklin's funeral.
I can't remember the phrase, but he was talking about love, and when the world loved, how the universe would come.
Yes.
Together, how the universe would come together.
I agree.
And I thought it was very unique and powerful that he said that, you know, because no one was thinking of love the way he was putting it, and I was like, wow, he's bringing these two people together and union, but he's talking about world love.
Yeah. But I mean, it was powerful because, I mean, you know, love is love. You know, you had a white brother and a biracial sister who identifies, you know, as biracial, coming together, and so they already represent diversity in this world. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, the white brother is the son of Princess Diana, who's loved all over the world. Yeah. You know, and in her own lifetime made an effort to bring different types of people together. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And was dating a man of color when she died. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? You know, and it's like, I don't want to live in a world that's filled of hate. You know, I don't want to be a part of this. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, you know, you were talking about images earlier and all that kind of stuff. We also have to question what we're digesting, you know, and it's not just black folks or Latino folks. It's like, or Asian folks, all of us, you know. I read somewhere that since the Godfather movie 1 and 2, there have been 7,000 films or TV shows that have depicted Italian Americans as mafia, which reinforces, like, it's almost like most of us don't even think of Italian Americans as anything else. Right. You feel what I'm saying? And so when you have stereotypes about people, is there going to be love for those people? Or are you just going to put them in a box? This is who they are. You know what I'm saying? And so we got to get out of that. I don't want to be in any box. I don't want to be in those boxes. Yeah. You know what I mean? In my ideal world, you know, it's one family, it's one race, but we got to get there. We got to make an effort to get there. You know what I mean? And that's going to take work. And that means that we're going to have uncomfortable conversations, really difficult conversations.
Yeah. The Philadelphia Youth Poetry Movement encourages the young people that express themselves through spoken word with the phrase "get free."
Wow.
And that is a very strong component of the very first essay that appears in this book. And so we are concluding this moment of sharing so that you can open yourself up to more of what Kevin shares in the book and get it signed. Support the storytelling and know that we need plenty more of this. So thank you. Thank you for coming out.